We are rapidly moving toward medicine that can address nearly all known diseases. The cloning of the human genome in 2000, genome editing, and other major breakthroughs continue to drive rapid advances in the treatment of genetic diseases, cellular and organ engineering, tissue repair, vaccine development, and immune system modulation. This talk is about what is currently possible in medicine and what might be in the near future. It is very exciting. For an optimistic investor's view on the future of medicine, please welcome Michael J. Kauffman, Co-Chairman and Chief Medical Officer, SIRTLab Corp.
Toda, Erev Tov, אני מבין רק קצר עברית, ואני מדבר אנגלית. Okay, so we're just being English tonight because it will be a very short talk without that. Okay, so I'm going to start off being very blunt. I'm going to speak about as a physician. And really, you know, there is a true but annoying saying that as soon as you are born, you begin to die. And this is a fact of all of us. They say that death and taxes are the only things that we'll all have to do, and you can avoid taxes, but you really can't avoid death. So, why do we die? The most important reason that we die originally is because of things that exist with us that kill us. Bacteria, viruses, parasites. Increasingly, as we work on those, things like eating too much fat, eating too much sugar, pretty much eating too much anything leads to a problem, and if you really have fun with a lot of alcohol, that's going to kill you as well. There's been a long attempt to kill coffee and make sure that we don't drink coffee anymore, but every time they do a study, people who do drink coffee live longer. So you should drink coffee, and it's actually now recommended. I'm not kidding, it's really good for you. And by the way, a couple of drinks, just 2 drinks of alcohol a day is also good for you. What else gets us? Well, during the Industrial Revolution, you inhaled a lot of crap. We didn't know about this stuff, and you got into real trouble, and of course pollution kills us. So there's all those kinds of environmental things that can get you. When I say edibles, I mean people who like to go out and get natural things. There are a lot of natural things that are super deadly. In fact, the most deadly things that we have, almost the most deadly things that we can eat are natural. So be careful about natural things. And then too much sun exposure, especially if you have DNA repair defects and so on, gets you. And last but not least, the reason people don't live forever, period, is because we're just genetically not programmed to do that. It just doesn't work. And of course, scientists can look at all this and we'll attack each one of them. I'll move quickly. But the real question is, what can we do about the top one? Even in people that live to 100, can we reach 140 or 180 or 200? In a healthy way, and I'm not talking about being miserable. I'm talking about living a healthy, what's become now a health span instead of a lifespan, okay, to live healthy. So if you look back 300 years or so, really we had 2 sort of ages that we lived till. If you were in the sort of developing-ish world, or the Western world, if you will, or Asia or so on, you had either a 35-year lifespan on average, or about a 15 to 18-year lifespan. So that's the baseline. That's what humans could sort of do once we got our act together and knew how to write and communicate. That's what we're starting with. The fact that we have an average lifespan of around 80 now, coming up from 35, is astonishing. And it's not only doubling it. This isn't a physics problem where we want to work through 5 orders of magnitude. Okay, it is astonishing because every day that you're alive, everything is trying to get you. Now, you shouldn't go out of here being paranoid, but we all saw with this COVID pandemic that nature likes to throw curveballs at us. And it's going to continue to do. And by the way, the reason people are getting sicker now than they used to is because all the time we were wearing masks, we were getting exposed to a lot of these viruses, including old ones like respiratory syncytial virus, RSV. But we had the masks on, so we weren't exposed. So now we take them off, and now we all get the stuff that we didn't get exposed to, and so on. So it's all a trade-off. The point is that lots of things are out to get you. The question is, what are we going to live? What's going to be the lifespan in 2040, and what's going to be possible? The last thing I'll ask you to think about is to please remember that it's not about the median all the time. It's not about the mean. It's about what's possible. because there's a lot of people who are going to bring down the mean because they don't care. And that's not up to you. As an individual, if you decide you want to work on living a long time and a healthy life, you get to take advantage of all the modern tools there are and not be worried about whether someone wants to eat themselves because they love food. That's okay, but you're going to suffer the consequences. So think about the upper end as well, what's possible. Medicine is, in my mind, and this is the way I practice, it's all about minimizing suffering. People get to live a reasonably enjoyable life as much as possible and within a reasonable constraint, meaning you can't eat 200 pounds of food a day and expect to be healthy, but you can certainly enjoy yourself. And if your cholesterol's out of whack, my job should be to give you a pill that's safe and effective and lets you eat what you want so you can enjoy your life and get your cholesterol down at the same time. At the end of the day, it's all about minimizing the genetic contribution from mom and dad. In this case, it's not just mom's. It's both mom and dad's fault. They gave you bad genes that came from evolution, and that's the problem. What we used to die from, there was a lot of death in childbirth. And that ranged from everything from infection. A lot of these things that happened were due to an early infection that led to a premature labor, and then the mom went into, got septic or got infected and died and so on. Childbirth is and was a very big problem. Nowadays, childbirth can be a big problem. We have a terrible saying, it's a little cynical in medicine, but everything is great in obstetrics, which is when the baby's being born, until it's not. And when it's not, it is south fast. And you better have a modern institution, in my opinion, available for that situation. It might be uncommon, but when it happens, it's a bad situation. Infant mortality used to be very, very high. We had a lot of vaccine. We have a lot of viruses and bacteria that got us. We have a ton of vaccines now that we give kids on crazy schedules. You're always bringing them in for the first 2 years of life. Thank God for that, because otherwise they could literally die or be permanently damaged. And adolescents would come down with tuberculosis and polio, rheumatic heart disease, and spend the rest of their lives impaired or dead. In case of polio, which we only get to talk about when there's a resurgence, like we have every now and then, because people don't like to get vaccinated for reasons I don't understand. Polio comes back, a few people get paralyzed, 1 or 2 die, they end up on a heart-lung machine. And I'm saying this glibly and cynically because it is that stupid. We can prevent polio completely. And some people choose not to, and that's, they're the people on the bottom end of the curve. We need to be careful about what we're inhaling. We always find out that stuff is more toxic than we think. The vape, everybody thought we were going to get rid of the cigarette pollution and the tars and the nicotines. We went to vaping. It turns out that causes pneumonitis. It inflames your lung. You can get into real trouble. There are lung transplants in young people who had this happen. Very uncommon, but as we say in medicine, it sucks when it happens. So we got to be aware of that stuff. In the old days, heart disease would get you if you lived that long. But most people in the old days died of an infection, pneumonia, tuberculosis, a viral infection, other kinds of infection. Nowadays, it moved to heart attacks, except nowadays was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, heart attacks were 30% fatal. Today, it's less than 10%. If you're around a modern medical center and the eye alone is not completely packed, then your chances of dying in a heart attack are less than 5%. Okay? Tell me that's about 3 a.m. is when the eye alone is not completely packed. And then what's becoming increasingly common now is that people are living long enough that all we hear about is cancer and dementia, and sometimes both, and it's brutal. So what about some progress real quick before I finish up? And I know I'm running through sort of everything, but I think it's very optimistic, actually. I went to med school in 1985 until 92. I took a long time to get out because I wasn't too bright. And we didn't know what caused HIV. And we were all capped and gowned and we were terrified. We didn't know what to call it. It was AIDS-associated virus. It had a bunch of other names. It was a 100% lethal disease, 99.998%. There were a few people with funny mutations that prevent it. But it was essentially always a death sentence, and it was miserable. We had bacteria and pathogens that we never heard of that these people got, and they died slowly and miserably, and they wasted away. Plenty of movies on this. It is essentially now a chronic disease with an almost normal or normal lifespan. In our lifetime, 30 years ago, we went from we didn't know what caused this to a bunch of drugs that can completely suppress it all the time with minimal side effects that you take once a day, usually by mouth. Now, it's not perfect. Why can't we cure it? Well, we haven't figured that out yet, but there are a lot of people who are trying to cure it. And they're working on ways to, you got to basically take it out of your DNA. It gets into your DNA, it gets stuck there, you're in deep shit, pardon my language, but we're working on ways to get it out. HCV, we didn't know what to call it. When I grew up, it was called non-A, non-B hepatitis. Okay, that tells you what it isn't. It's like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It doesn't tell you what it is. Now it is completely curable. It's curable. You can take 12 weeks of a therapy and it's gone in 85% of people. And if you take another 12 weeks of therapy, 10% of those remaining people, so 95% overall, are curable. It's cured. It's done. Over. Game over. Most of the blood cancers when I started in medicine were a nightmare. They were a death sentence because people got, when your blood system goes, your immune system goes, and you end up with infections. Most of the blood cancers now are curable in a proportion of patients, and many of them are absolutely controllable so that you die from something else, which is a functional definition in medicine that we like to say when we haven't cured something, is that we keep you up alive long enough that you get something else. It's still pretty amazing. I started in myeloma, my career, I have 3 drugs in myeloma. It was a 2-year death sentence when I started. It is now an average lifespan of 8 years, and people are living 10 to 20 years with this disease. It never, ever happened before. There were 0% of people who lived that long when I started. Okay, I could go down the whole list, but you get the point. Okay, so my last 2 slides, and I have a lot in here, and you're welcome to take the presentation. What's the future going to look like? First of all, we might all like to go into our doctor and be pressed and prodded, and it's cute, and it's nice they put their hands on you. It's almost been proven to be completely useless, other than for emotional support. I'm being very honest about this. The doctor has no idea what's going on inside of you when they're pressing on you. They might have a pretty good idea, but it's a lot more effective to get an MRI, which has about a 98% assessment of what's going on in you. And if you had a PET scan and a whole bunch of other cool stuff that we do, and yes, it costs a lot of money, but you can be 100% accurate, essentially. It would be nice to know your genome, your entire genetic code. This will happen. We need to get over the privacy issues. We better get over them, because this is the most important thing. Finding out if you have a disease like Tay-Sachs before it kicks in. We do most of that now automatically. But why do we do it for one disease when there are 10,000 diseases we could check? It makes very little sense. And we don't need to wait until people are 5 or 6 to find out that they have a spastic neurological disease that's going to leave them in a wheelchair or dead in the next 10 years. There's no reason. Okay, so all of this has to be digitized. We don't need to be in hospitals. It's horrible. We need to get back to care that we can deliver in the house, even if it requires IV and so on. We need to correct DNA mutations that are bad. Okay, letting someone, in my opinion, letting someone with a fatal mutation exist so that they can, be miserable and die miserably is not a good thing. We will have, in the very near future, a way to correct these problems early on, and we're doing it now in some cases. Infections need to be dealt with immediately. And hopefully, we'll try to minimize the political baloney that goes on. Okay? The fact that we could actually identify the COVID virus, figure out it was related to a lot of other COVID viruses, but much more deadly COVID-19, come up with a vaccine in very little time, do trials on tens of thousands of patients. And these are some of the most safe vaccines we have. Turns out the 3rd or 4th one that was approved is probably better than the 1st or 2nd one. They're just a lot harder to make. And move into a place where we can sit here and have this meeting today and be relatively safe, and almost completely safe that we're not going to get severe COVID. We're relatively safe we're not going to get COVID, but you are going to get it. If you haven't gotten it, you're going to get it. And if you think you haven't gotten it, you probably have. Okay. And we're also going to work on regenerative medicine and things to correct real problems. So when you get your arm lopped off in an accident with one of these giant tractors or whatever, we're going to put on bionics. Just like in the $6 Million Man, it's just going to take another 20 years to get to be as good as Lee Majors, for those of you who know who I'm talking about, which is a long time ago, probably not many of you. Okay, but the point is, we are going to have that ability pretty soon. Okay, and my last slide, they're going to shoot me up here, but I'm living longer. is there is one thing. We are capped. And there are, meaning our genome has in it the instructions that we're not going to live forever. And that forever is topping out at 110, 120 now maximum, but you have to be super lucky. We have started to identify the genes that are involved in that programming, and we found out that there's some proteins in your body whose levels start off really high when you're really young, and they just drop down over time. And if you eat poorly and don't exercise and do all the bad things, they drop down faster. We're working on a gene. I'm in a very cool company. Actually, a lot of the work came out of Bar-Ilan University, Chaim Cohen, right here. And he figured out that a protein called SIRT6 is probably the top longevity gene right now, meaning you get more of it, you live longer. Not always true, but interestingly, mice, which live only 2 years, they have a little bit of it, and it doesn't last very long. Humans have a lot of it. We live for a long time. And the probably sad mixed blessing thing about this is if you give it to a mouse who's taking McDonald's diet or Wendy's diet every night, and their blood looks like the blood there with the white stuff in it, that's fat on the top of the blood, that shouldn't be there, and you give them this protein, then you don't get the problem. So more SIRT6 keeps your body happy, even when you're eating McDonald's. It's probably we should go talk to McDonald's. So thank you very much. I want to leave this up there, and I want to thank you all. Just remember, we're in innovation here. It's not the critic who counts. There's a lot more critics than there are innovators. Whoops, they took it away. Just remember that this is all about the person who goes and innovates and drives it, falls down and gets back up and wins. Thanks, everybody.